Hello, and welcome to Arwe Journey, the story of Afro-Caribbean people's migration from the Caribbean to Europe and North America during the entire 100-year period of the 20th century. I have been wanting to do this series since I was in university 30 years ago. Studying Jacob Lawrence, I came upon his series, The Great Migration, which told the story of African Americans migrating from the South through the North during the 30s and 40s here in this country. I wanted to tell my people's story, like the way many of us want to tell the story of our people. And so using that inspiration, I chose 61 panels and came up with this thing that I hope you guys enjoy and I hope you guys can connect to, because all of us at some point can go back in our own history and find the story of our people's migration to another place. All right, so here we actually have the very beginning of the series. Let's talk a little bit about the first 3 or 4 of them. Ellis Island, 1908, I believe. I use photographs in a lot of research. I've been doing it for about 20 years on most of these. And it was, even for myself, who's been doing so much, it was really amazing to realize when I found this picture, just the way they're dressed. You know, as the grandson of a tailor, I know it might have taken this man maybe more than half a year to save up the money to actually be able to go to a tailor and have a suit built from scratch to get on this boat. So it was really blew my mind to see that. And these are the kind of things that I think is important to capture in these. This is like 1911, and these are 3 women from Guadeloupe. Now I know the photographer, what he saw were 3 beautiful black women, so he grouped them together into a picture. But again, being the grandson of a seamstress also who made clothes, I know that what he did in this picture was group 2 different classes, the very upper class with these 2 women on the left, and the lower class, or the class my grandmother would have come from. And you could tell about the clothes and the hats. These women are wearing very expensive clothes made from very expensive material, and the hats are European made. They probably had them and bought them off of a boat. This woman here, she's wearing a cotton dress and a traditional madras head tie that's from the Central Africa. So you could see right away what's going on. Her petticoat is showing. And in the photograph, these 2 women on the left, they're completely offended. So there's this space that they create between them by standing off. And she, of course, because she's very proud, she has her fist balled and she's looking at them sort of down her eyes at them. And I loved the fact that he didn't capture that, but I was able to pick up on that very quickly, because I know the subtleties of coming from a class society where everybody's black, but there's still divide, if you will. So that was pretty cool to run up on that. And then we go to World War I. And a lot of these soldiers that we don't know, a lot of Caribbean people actually signed up to go and fight for Europe during that time. And some weren't given recognition in their medals until, posthumously, until years after their deaths. So it was running into these things and sort of learning the story of us and how long we have been leaving our place in the Caribbean and coming to Europe and to the Americas to not only want to live, but to volunteer for wars and to fight for the motherland, because at that time, many of us were still colonies. This is probably the part that really kind of was the kick in the butt, if you will, to start this series. Right as the pandemic was starting, the Windrush generation came back in the news. It seems in England, a lot of these people that were now in their 70s and 80s and were going for their benefits, their Medicaid and these kind of things, after being there for 60 and 70 years, were being told that there was no record of them being in England. And the way it worked was the Windrush was actually a captured German boat that was recommissioned and used by the British to come through the Caribbean right after World War II and basically solicit Caribbean people to come to Europe, to England specifically, and rebuild London, all the places that Hitler had leveled. And in exchange, they would be getting full citizenship and all the benefits of being a British citizen. So as you would imagine, many, many people, including my grandmother's sister, Auntie Belle, got on those boats and traveled to Europe in the hopes of making a better life for their family. And so that's what this whole generation is about. And the point I made earlier about the suits, again, you could see it in these. You could see the clothes that happened. I think instantly, I think of my grandparents with the tailor and the seamstress and how long these things must have took. And because it is an ode to Jacob Lawrence, I was also, paid attention to the iconography he used in his. So he used the suitcase, or what we call it's in the English grip. I remember calling it that as a boy. He used that as a symbol for travel. So you will see the grip repeated in my series as well. And just because it's Lawrence again, and I am definitely a big, big fan of his work, they were owed. So this here, if you know anything about Lawrence's work and his Afro-Cubism style, you're going to see that in my work. And this is a blatant use of one of his angles, if you will, to create my composition as an ode to him. And you'll see little things like that throughout the series. So I really wanted to talk about, like, pinpoint this part, because you see, you know, things like the actual rebuilding of London, and you see the men dressed to the nine looking for work as soon as they got off the boat. So these ideas of like lazy people, I don't know where those stories came from, because what I know of is the people who hit the ground running. And the minute they got there, I mean, you know, they had to start looking for ways to grow and to better their family. A lot of times, this is how we survived, because the things we got when it was time for school, we would send to England, and they would send, you know, those things to us here in the Caribbean, and that's how we started thinking about my family. When we started contemplating, maybe we can migrate and go and join them and get an opportunity to see if we can make our lives better. And so this to me is very personal, this aspect of it, because this is when my family started contemplating, maybe we should move. Well, here we are. I'm going to call this When I Met America. John Wayne, Cowboys, and Coca-Cola. This is my childhood. That's me and my cousin Jason in the backyard of my grandmother's house. This is how I met America in Europe, and how I started to fantasize about wanting to go there. And that's pretty much, I'm sure anybody that migrated to America, they can tell you a story very similar to that. But this is when I got to capture that part of it. The airmail envelopes that came from America and Europe to back home to us, and how I would stand in the house and read the letter to everybody in the house. And this is that part of the story where we talk about, you actually see the process of the imagination and sort of the desperation and the poverty inside of the beauty that made you want to start thinking about, it's really lovely here and I love it, but the opportunities are so little, I want to go someplace else. And you start to think about the saving up of the monies and the eventual airplane trip for the first time, and landing in this airplane and being here in America, which is where my family came. Hey, and here we are now. We're here, you know, you've in this new place. There's confusion of not knowing what or how you're going to make it to the next place. But then there's familiarity. So in the middle of all of this new things, there was the food, which even now as a father and a grandfather, I use to keep my children and my grandchildren connected to the culture. The food, the fact that you could cook, you still could cook your own foods. And a lot of times you would walk into a building, and the fact that you smelt something that you realize that, oh wow, there are people from my culture live in this building. And that's how we started creating these little enclaves where we could share the culture, even though we were in a new place, and you could still keep remnants of you intact. And so that's what this whole period is talking about. Coming here, getting used to this place, adapting to this place, and also dealing with the realities of the pushback. You know, go back home, go to the land you come from, the banana boat, all of those things come in that period. And you start to have the questions like, why did we come, and should we go back home, and do I really want to be here? And you start to find, you know, your spirit, and you find the people, and you realize so many of us have been coming here for so many years, from Davis, Marcus Garvey on, and we play such a role in culture here in America, not only black culture, but American culture as well, from the music to the writing to the foods, so that you hold your ground and you look for a place and you invent you in this new place. Just more of the process of the growing. You know, I remember, you know, my mother and her sisters working at any job they could get to survive and to get by, and you know, the teasing in school. I remember very, very clearly to remind my mother that though we wore uniforms and ties in school in the Caribbean, I did not want to wear a tie anymore because I was being teased every day. So this part of it is the ups and downs, and the you know, like we talked about earlier, here is that place where you go into a building and you realize on every floor is a Caribbean person. So now this becomes like a little CARICOM, like a little unity of a place. You go out into the world and you come back inside, and you can get the Jamaican neighbor and the Bajan neighbor and the Haitian neighbor and the Dominican neighbor downstairs, and you on a weekend, it smells like you're in the Caribbean because you could smell all the foods. And if the lady upstairs get mango, she's going to bring your mother some mango. And your mother's going to bring her stuff. And that community thing that you remembered in the Caribbean, where we took care of each other and we looked out for each other's children, you found little chunks of it that gave you like this energy to keep going and to keep going when it was winter and freezing outside and you had to get used to snow and you're taking the train and all those things. Being able to come back to that was really important. And in the hip hop and the music, you found a place where you could fit and where you can sort of reinvent yourself as a kid coming up here. And so all of those things were really, really important, these parts of it, you know, and coming into these parts of it. And then, you know, again, you had the sort of ability to now go and mimic your grandfather and your father, the way you remember them in the Caribbean, the Clark shoes and the ballys and those things all came back into play. And the enjoyment. You know, before there was ever dance halls or anything, we would make parties in each other's basements and basement parties, and you would get to hear the music again and start to feel like a Caribbean person inside of a new country again. And all of those things were really important to give you the perseverance to keep going with your feet on the ground and feeling solid and realize you could still be from Antigua, from Jamaica in America and not have to throw down your culture to pick up a new one. And that was really, really important for us in the growth and the development of a Caribbean culture inside of America. And now we're at the part of the journey where you start to see our triumphs and the way, you know, our culture started to become mainstream and sometimes get watered down and sometimes get misinterpreted and sometimes get bastardized. And all of those things, I guess, come with moving to new places. You have to endure all those things. But to me, this is the independence. This is, you know, that same woman that we saw a few panels back who was working at, you know, as a maid in a hotel. Now she's opened up the Caribbean store and opened up, you know, the restaurant that is now, you know, national and being traded on those kind of things. And you really start to see pride in self and pride in culture and being able to bring who we are to this new place. You know, of course, you're going to talk about the way our culture was exploited by Hollywood and different musical things, and they started taking the stereotypes and running with them. So we also had to endure that. We also had to endure the negative things that came with other people telling our story, which is why it's so important to tell things like that. So you are in charge of the narrative of your own story instead of allowing somebody that maybe just be intrigued by the outer aspects of it to be in charge of that story. And then, you know, more of that same sort of exploitation and running with who we are kind of thing. And it was really important to bring these things to the fore also because they're part of what we have to deal with even today. And that's why it's so important to be true enough to your culture to tell it as it actually is so that it's not misinterpreted. And here we have the last set of paintings in the series. And this painting was really important for me to capture. This is the mother, the woman who all those years ago got on the boat in the 40s, who is now a grandmother or great-grandmother, and just sitting and having her granddaughter braid her hair and remembering sort of the journey, the entire process, coming as a young woman and getting married, raising children and grandchildren and great-grandchildren, and going back home, and she's the one that passes down all the recipes from the old country so that they're still perpetuated in the new world. This is really important as a tie-in. This is just something I remember, again, this is us looking for our joy. So it's the going into the park and realizing that there are people from 4 different islands and the things you all share is the rhythm of the music and how that created communities outside of your homes, outside of your neighborhoods, and we started to grow bigger communities as Caribbean people here in this world. And then again, over here, this is the part I talked about with, you know, Belafonte passes, and I realized that Tyson, and Poitiers, Jamaica, St. Kitts and Barbuda, and the Bahamas, so much of who they are were from being immigrant children here in this country. I mean, I know heard stories of Poitiers and Belafonte when they were first, their accents were so thick when they were with the Negro Ensemble Theater in the 50s in New York that they had to take English speaking classes so that people could understand them better and their broken English got better. So that's amazing to think about 2 actors who are not only known for being very handsome and talented people, but also for their diction, which was so perfect English to hear their beginnings. and to be completely, could relate to that as a kid who was teased at first when I got here and having to practice the English. Even now today, I still in my head make sure I say hospital instead of hospital, and film instead of film, and battery instead of battery. So that's really disconnected, really awesome for me. And then the thing that I think all immigrants want, you love this new place as well. You don't want to give up your old country, but you do love your new home. And so you become a citizen, and you raise your hand and you pledge allegiance. And so that celebrates that as well, because that's also a part of the migration, is adopting new cultures and adding them to yours, and becoming a fuller sort of human being, if you will. And in the ode to Lawrence, because I thought he was he's so brilliant as an artist to this day, is to literally follow his steps. So his first painting talks about coming, getting on boats and coming, and his last painting, talked about, and we continue to come. So that's basically what this last one is. But we continue to come, risking everything, hoping for better tomorrows. And that's what this is. This is the Haitian brothers and sisters in the end of the 90s, the last decade of the 20th century, risking hell and high water, literally, and coming across the ocean on these makeshift boats where their lives were literally in danger, looking for betterness. This is Guantanamo Bay. The first time we heard, Caribbean people heard of it, outside of, being from Cuba, was when these same Haitians were kept there until they could be processed and sometimes sent back to Haiti, and sometimes allowed to come to the mainland here in America and start their lives as American immigrants. And that is, to me, is an entire sort of encapsulates that story from the very beginning on the boat to the end. And that's exactly the way Lawrence did it. I used the captions instead of titles the way he did, so that when you start at the beginning, you come all the way around, you have this story of the migration of African Caribbean people, just the way Lawrence did with his series. I really hope you guys enjoyed this. Thank you so much for taking the time to view Arwe Journey, my story. The thing that's beautiful about this and the continuum is that I was inspired by Jacob Lawrence telling the story of his people, and I believe that that's what these type of art things do. So I would look forward to bringing it to your town, to your museum, to your gallery, to your university, and really continuing that story, that conversation of migration. And so that some other child in the future can look at this and be inspired and want to tell the story of their people's migration, because that's what this is. It's the story of people moving to places and how they're accepted and the struggles they go to reach triumph.